Hey there, welcome back to your go-to rendezvous for everything tech without the headache. I'm your host, Craig Peterson, and of course, and today, folks, we're diving into a topic that, well, let's face it, probably bugs us all more than a mosquito on a hot summer night in New England. Spam emails. Not the kind from a can. No. So if you've ever opened your inbox to find it bursting at the seams with emails you don't remember signing up for, today is your lucky day. Before we dive in, though, I've got a little question for you. I am curious, how do you find my show? I'm a little old school, frankly. You see, I prefer the cozy warmth of a fireplace at night in the winter, or in this case, word of mouth over the cold glare of advertisements. If you're getting a kick out of our little tech talks here, why not let your friends in on the secret? It's the camaraderie for me, folks. All right, so let's roll up our sleeves and tackle this email monster. First things first, let's address the big question. Why so much spam? Well, essentially, because it's easy and cheap for spammers to send out. For them, it's like fishing with dynamite, and unfortunately, your inbox is the lake. But don't fret, there's hope yet to make your digital lake a no-fishing zone. I have a link in the bottom of pretty much every weekly email that I send out with a service that I use and I like, and if you click on that and sign up, I get a whole month free. How exciting for me, right? Yeah, $5 whole bucks. But I love this service. I've been using it for years. Let's start with a simple step that's really as hearty as a bowl of chowder on a cold day. Filters. Most email services offer some sort of spam filtering. The trick is to make sure it's turned on and tuned up to your needs. Think of it as setting the right trap for these pesky email invaders. Next up, let's talk about something we often do without a second thought. Posting our email addresses willy-nilly online. That's like leaving your front door wide open, folks. Spammers use software that scours the web for these emails. Solutions? Well, there's a couple here. One is, if you post your email publicly, try a format that's human-friendly but bot-confusing, like, Craig@peterson.com, for instance, instead of the whole website, right? Maybe Craig or my email is Craig@peterson.com. Something like that a person could digest, but a spam bot that's crawling the website could not. Another very, very big one is what is called plus addressing. Now, plus addressing is something I've used for literally decades, going on 40 years now. Most email systems that are out there allow you to put a plus sign and other stuff into the middle of an email address. So, for instance, for me, if I'm signing up for something online, I might use an email address. So, for instance, let's say it's for Walmart. I might say Craig plus Walmart at CraigPeterson.com. Yeah, just the plus sign, Craig plus sign Walmart at CraigPeterson.com. Those filters I just talked about that make your life so much easier? Well, now when an email comes in, it's going to be addressed to Craig plus Walmart, not just Craig. So now I can use those filters to say, if an email comes in from Craig plus Walmart, that then tells me what? Well, it tells me that either they sold my email address, shame on them, but hey, that happens pretty much every day, or maybe it's an email I want to see. So I can have the email filters automatically move that email to the email box that really matters to me. Okay? So plus addressing, don't forget that. You just say on the left-hand side, your regular left-hand side. So my email might be, it is Craig@CraigPeterson.com, right? Well, if I want to use plus addressing, again, the left-hand side of that is Craig, right? And the right-hand side of that is at CraigPeterson.com. So I would just add a plus in the middle of all of that. So Craig plus, and then some word that identifies who I'm signing up with, and then at CraigPeterson.com. All run together. Okay, you got that? That is a huge, huge win for me because it makes it very easy to filter emails I want to see, I don't want to see, or maybe I just want to check once a week. And it puts it into an email box. Now, this does work with Gmail. This works with Microsoft 365. It works with most mailing systems out there, but you might want to double check. By the way, it also works for those of you who have been following my advice for email. It works with Proton Mail as well. And Proton Mail, great site. Hosted overseas under Swiss law, and it keeps your information absolutely private. It's great. They have a free version and then various paid versions. Now, another question for you. Ever heard of the unsubscribe track? Oh, this one's really a sneaky one, and it's been around for a long time. You see an unsubscribe link in the email and think, aha, my ticket out of this mess, right? Well, beware here, because clicking some of these that come from spammers can validate that your email address is a valid one, is correct, that you read your emails. So now, guess what? Your email is worth even more to the hosers that are out there that are trying to trick you into doing something. So instead of clicking on the unsubscribe link, if you don't recognize the sender, chuck it straight into the bin, right into the trash. No mercy. And for the business owners who are listening, let's take a second to talk about your team. You need to educate all of them on the basics of email hygiene, like not opening suspicious emails or attachments. Teach them this rule about plus addressing, because I've seen this many times. One of our team members may end up clicking on an email link, going somewhere they shouldn't have gone, downloading something, getting ransomware, right? You don't want to lose all of the money in your operating account. And I have seen that personally multiple times in businesses, okay? So keep your employees and your contractors on top of this. I want you to think of it as a tech equivalent of wash your hands before returning to work, right? It's a simple rule, but boy, does it save on headaches. Now, tipping our hats to our friends running their own show, a domain-based message authentication reporting and conformance policy. These are DMARC policies. They are important nowadays. Google is forcing you, if you send it to Gmail, to have DMARC records and SPF records, right? This is kind of technical. But if you're seeing emails bounce, there's probably a problem with what's called DMARC. And this can be a lifesaver. It sounds fancy, right? But it's just a way to tell the email providers which emails are genuinely from you and which are wearing a crafty disguise. It's like telling the postman only letters with your secret handshake are allowed in, right? And as for the grand finale, I want you to consider third-party services that specialize in spam protection. And they're like the bouncers at the front door, right? Making sure the riff-raff emails don't even get a chance to knock. And that's something that we do for our clients using some specialized software from Cisco. It's absolutely fantastic, okay? So let's bring it back here. Whether you're a solo entrepreneur, braving the wiles of the internet, or someone just trying to keep their inbox sane here, these steps are your digital Swiss Army knife. It's versatile, it's handy, it's got all kinds of little knives and tools, but you really have to be familiar with them. And what's technology without a little laugh, right? Imagine if we handed unwanted mail in real life, like spam emails. Imagine you're out at the side of the street there, opening your mailbox or wherever it might be, only to find a clown jumping out trying to sell you a magic potion, right? The old snake oil trick. That might be a bit much, but you get the picture. So to wrap up the chat here, let's remember, folks, the goal isn't just to survive the digital age, but to thrive in it. And thriving means taking control of your digital space, one spam-free inbox at a time. Have you got any questions? You need a hand in demystifying more tech puzzles? Just jump over to CraigPeterson.com, hit me up. Right there in the homepage, you can sign up. You'll get my free weekly newsletter. In fact, if you sign up right now, you'll get this week's newsletter where I have some real details about using plus addressing in your emails, right? It's important. Check your newsletter this week. Find that article, click through, because the email just has a quick summary, right? If you click through, it takes you to my website. That's a link you could trust. And then once you're on my website, you'll find the article. And I have step-by-step, I explain it. I talk about which providers support plus addressing and how best to use it, right? So it's simple enough to do. If you are getting my newsletter, just hit reply and ask your question. And who knows, it might just be the star of our next show. So keep your tech smart and your humor sharp and stay safe out there. Sign up right now. CraigPeterson.com. Of course, a whole bunch more coming right up. And did I say Hawaii pizza? You know, I meant Hawaiian pizza, right? Yeah. But before we jump into today's tech gospel, I'm curious, how did you find us? I've been told we're like that secret recipe your aunt refuses to share. We're only passed along by word of mouth. I do not advertise this show. So if you're loving what you're hearing, be a pal and share the goodness, would you? All right, diving in. Did you know Google, yes, our go-to for everything from why is the sky is blue to how to fix a leaky faucet has ties that trace back not just to a garage in Silicon Valley, but to the CIA and NSA? No, this isn't a script for a new sci-fi flick, folks, here. 2 decades back, Uncle Sam's very own intelligence community was shaking hands with a couple of the bright minds of Silicon Valley. The aim to keep track of us in cyberspace. And guess who was at the heart of it all? Bingo, Google. Yeah, those guys. They received funding. They received a grant. And the whole idea behind all of this was, can we track people, and can we track the essence of discussions? What are people worried about? What are they talking about? By having a search engine. So keep track of everything everyone's saying. Keep track of everything everyone is, of course, asking, and then put it all together and come up with a basic model of people in the USA or in other countries, right? We're talking about a windfall for the CIA and NSA, which NSA, in case you don't know, used to be no such agency, right? Remember, they denied its existence forever. And, of course, now we know it is a national security agency. Now, before you get all jittery thinking Big Brother is watching every cat video you click on, they're not really watching, but they are tracking because Big Brother is Google in this case, right? So they have made a lot of money from advertising. How do they make money from advertising? They sell information about you to whomever will pay for it, okay? But this collaboration between the intelligence agencies and a couple of tech pioneers was about making sense of these haystacks of data out there. They wanted to be able to filter through mountains of digital information to, well, make our lives easier, right? That's why we use Google, because it does make our lives easier, doesn't it? And in that whole process, Google was born, not just as a search engine, but as a tool to navigate this vast digital world. It also makes me think back to the early days of search engines. I really like Digital's Alta Vista search engine. It was very flexible. It was very good. It did what you told it to do versus Google, which, of course, tries to influence your thinking and heavily influences the results of the searches. And thinking back to Alta Vista is one example. Of course, there were many. I'm really wondering now if those agencies didn't have something to do with the whole win by Google of the search engine business. Google owns the 2 top search engines in the world. Can you think of what those are? What are the 2 top search engines in the world? Well, number 1, of course, Google.com. You got that one right. Ding, 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 ding. Well, how about the second most popular search engine? Do you know what that is? It's YouTube. YouTube. Interesting, eh? So what's in this, especially small business owners who aren't tech wizards? Well, plenty. Understanding how these tech tools came to be and what they're capable of can unlock ways to skyrocket your business. So do I have your ears perked up? Good. Okay, here's a few things you can do today to leverage this knowledge. 1, be data savvy. You know, it's not just the NSA, CIA, and other government agencies that look at a lot of data and need a lot of data. We business owners need to be doing the same thing. We need to be collecting data on what our customers enjoy. That can help tailor our services and products. Think Google Analytics, but for your small business. In fact, if you don't mind Google having those numbers, Google allows you to embed analytics in almost everything that you do electronically for your advertising and marketing. Google Analytics has pixels that you can put onto your emails, that you can stick into your web pages, on your sales pages, right, your shopping cart, and can report back to you what people are really interested in. Number 2, go digital if you haven't already. You've got to make sure you establish a digital presence. And frankly, it needs to be more than just a brochure online. Whether it's a website or social media, you need to be where your customers are. Okay? Important. Stay secure. With great power, of course, comes great responsibility. You have a direct responsibility for your customers' data, for your employees' data. Absolutely do. You need to be cautious with it. You need to be careful with it. You need to ensure your businesses and customers' data is locked up tighter than Fort Knox. And that requires some effort. No 2 ways about it. Nowadays, there's laws all across the world that if you lose customer data, particularly individual customer identifiable data, there are serious fines and in some places even jail time. You got to keep learning here because the digital world's ever evolving. Stay curious, stay informed, and use technology to your advantage. We talk all the time about different tools you can use for virtually everything. We're just talking about Google Analytics, right? So you need to look for those tools that help you with manage your finances, scheduling posts on social media, even nowadays writing those posts. Find the ones that work for you and don't be afraid to experiment, okay? Don't be afraid of tech. Most of it's fairly simple. You know, funny enough, thinking about these massive surveillance projects that led to the creation of Google reminds me of the time I tried to bake some bread but ended up inventing a new type of crouton. But yeah, it's a story for another day. But I want you to remember one thing here. Knowledge is power, but it's how we use that power that defines us. Technology, despite its complex roots, is here to serve us, to make life a bit easier and a touch more connected. Behind the curtain, technology can be very, very involved, and you need some true professionals. But nowadays, we are so far removed from the inside workings of the technology that pretty much anybody can do it. So before we get back into your adventure in cyberspace, I want you to swing by CraigPeterson.com. Right there in the homepage, you can sign up for the free newsletter. You can hit reply to any newsletter with any questions that you have. I'm all ears. Plus, you'll find, of course, some serious nuggets of wisdom there, some checklists of things you can do to keep your data safe and private. You don't want to miss it. So keep your data safe. Stay safe. Remember, it's a digital world out there, and we all are part of it, and we all have to explore it and that includes you, all right? Share this with other people. You're learning stuff. You should be sharing it, and don't be afraid to share it, and don't be afraid to hit reply to my newsletter and ask me questions, because I answer every one of them. Now, it might take me a few days, maybe a week or two, depending on how busy I am, but I always get back with you, all right? CraigPeterson.com. Boy, this has been a subject off and on for at least a few years now, and you've heard of it. I'm sure it's called TikTok, and it's something that's become very popular, particularly with younger segments of our community here in the U.S. Some of the numbers I've seen are shocking, frankly, about how much time people are spending on it. It's showing right now that about 3 hours to 4 hours a day on these short social media video sites. So YouTube has them, there's Instagram, there's others that are out there, and some of them have some really cute little videos, right? Funny dog videos, kids trying to sing along to songs. There's just all kinds of stuff on TikTok. It's very, very addictive. But there's more beneath the surface, folks, especially when geopolitical aspects and technology are entwined. We're talking about spaghetti on a fork. It's just hand in hand. And according to some recent findings in Peter Schweitzer's new book, Blood Money, it seems our youth's favorite app, TikTok, might well be a modern-day Trojan horse, and not the kind that simply disrupts your computers. We're talking about a type hailing from the Chinese Communist Party aiming to inject propaganda right into the impressionable minds of America's youth. That's a long way from crazy cat videos, no questions about it. And it's something that many of us have been using. But when I dug into this book here by Schweitzer and looked at TikTok's algorithm, well, obviously we can't see the algorithm, right? Because it itself is considered a national security asset by the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah, so, okay, I guess I didn't really see the algorithm, but I've seen studies that show how addictive that algorithm is. So why would it be so addictive? Well, the first most obvious answer would be it's something that's going to allow them to make money. The more time you spend on the platform, the more money you make. And you might be saying, hey, Craig, well, isn't that what YouTube does? Well, of course that's what YouTube does. They want you on the platform as long as possible to sell advertising, to track you and sell information about you to advertisers, not only on YouTube, but to sell it to advertisers on other platforms as well. So that's all well and good. And okay, you could certainly say, bottom line, yeah, it's kind of what everybody does. But no, hey, there's more to this. There is some great quotes in Schweitzer's book again, where this general called Zeng, Z-E-N-G, defines cognitive space. And he's arguing that Beijing can win mind superiority through several means, including perception manipulation via propaganda. These are their words, okay, people? I'm not just making this up. He says that they can change how people look at the present, the current political situation. Next up, cutting off historical memory by warping their views of their own country's past so people will be open to changing their values. Changing the paradigm of thinking by targeting people to change the way they view problems and thereby changing their beliefs. Deconstructing symbols by getting people to retain certain things and reject traditional symbols and thereby modifying a nation's identity. The ultimate goal is to manipulate a country's values and achieve strategic goals without an actual overt military battle, Zeng said. Okay? Yeah, so I'm looking at a picture right now with Communist Party leader Xi Jinping with all of the members of a training session that includes our wonderful Zeng here we were just quoting. Okay, this is very serious. Strategists who were cited in Chinese disinformation efforts on social media, that's the name of a paper, advocated for subconscious messaging instead of overtly political propaganda and using a soft touch to influence young people in the West. Now, we've been concerned about TikTok for a lot of different reasons. One is it could potentially be tracking you. Those videos that are being shot provide details about the background, where you are, at what you're doing at the time, right? It's absolutely crazy. So he goes on a little further here. This is Zhu Sen in what he had written here in communicating our military's advanced culture to the world. With regard to Western audiences, we need to conscientiously filter the content of communication, finding more points of resonance and common ground. Even in the case of positive propaganda, we also need to be adept at softening the content. For example, using stories to convey things, translating viewpoints into stories, and concealing them in stories. We should adopt open and emotional methods. Did you know this stuff? Did you know that that's the type of propaganda that China is trying to get in front of your kids and my kids and grandkids? Through what? Through TikTok, as well as other programs that are out there. No question about that. Don't get me wrong. But TikTok is directly controlled by the military in China. That's kind of the bottom line here. So what do you do about it? Our kids are addicted. There's no question about it. And the kids are going to, just like we used to talk around the water coolers at work, our kids are going to be going to school and talking about the latest crazy thing they saw on TikTok. It isn't just about the crazy things they're doing that kill kids, you know, these TikTok challenges, the dangerous ones. But they're going to be talking about stuff, and the kids are going to feel bad, and then they're going to be manipulated by their peers, and ultimately they end up in the hands of, again, a foreign country that's trying to take over the rest of the world. Literally, it's crazy. I can't believe I'm saying this stuff, but it's absolutely true. So when it comes to your kids, here's some points. One, talk about it with them. You really can't overstate this, folks. If you have a concern, talk about it. This talking can really do wonders. You've got to bring up your worries, your concerns. Don't play the because I said so card, unless they're 2 years old, right? Instead, explain the whys. You might be surprised by how much young people really can appreciate and understand the reasoning behind the rules that you're going to put in place. And I think you should. Provide alternative apps to them. Just telling them no to TikTok is like telling a kid not to eat candy, right? Maybe they're going to want it even more. So what do? Well, I would say alternatives. Come up with some alternatives that you're comfortable with. Maybe it's YouTube Kids. I don't know, where can you go online? I was thinking earlier as I was writing these notes to myself, maybe like Disney or Disney Plus, but my gosh, have you heard that song Let It Go from Frozen? It's kind of catchy, is it? Let it go, let it go. We all need to let stuff go. There's no question about that. But read the words carefully. And even the Disney movies, from The Lion King, Simba and Pumbaa, I think it was, song. I'm trying to remember the name of those two characters. But what they're saying is let go of traditional values. You don't need those, the things you were raised with. So I don't think Disney's a great alternative for kids out there. But be present. Don't hover around the kids, right? You don't want to be hovering, being a helicopter parent when you're trying to wean them off TikTok, and make it a group adventure. Have a screen off time for the whole family. I've seen too many families who are out at a meal, out supposedly doing things together, and yet they're spending their time on their smartphones, on the screens, right? So make it a group adventure. Hey, everybody is not only turning off TikTok, we're turning off everything today or this evening or whatever works for you guys. I got this advice in my newsletter. Make sure you get it. It's free. CraigPeterson.com. Well, I think Elon Musk and a little bit of, well, publicity, let's say, go hand in hand. No question about it, right? And OpenAI, that's an interesting company. Now, for those that aren't aware of it, OpenAI is the company behind ChatGPT, and in fact is being used by all kinds of different companies to generate their own little artificial intelligences. And these AIs, as they stand today, are pretty good at helping you draft things, getting beyond the writer's block if you're trying to write something, and, reasonable about putting information together for you. They miss a lot of stuff. They're wrong about a lot of stuff. You've probably heard about some of the hallucinations that these artificial intelligence machines have, where they will make up stuff. They'll make up court cases, and some of the attorneys have been caught on that one. They'll go ahead and make up all kinds of things. URLs, names of books, even authors. They're terrible, at least right now. But they're a great way to get started. They're about, I would say in my case, they're about a 60% good first draft. Good? I don't know. Lousy first draft. Maybe that's the way to put it. Well, when it comes to AI and OpenAI, there's another name that's a part of this whole field, and that's Elon Musk himself. And Elon's been an interesting guy over the years. He's kind of like a modern-day, real-life Tony Stark. He's involved in a lot of different technologies. And he was one of the founders of OpenAI. Isn't that something? So he is behind, ultimately, ChatGPT and a bunch of things. He's come up with his own AI called Grok that's being tied into X, and there's just all kinds of very cool stuff that he's been doing out there. Well, right now, he's gone and done something that's really got everybody in the whole AI world talking, because he's suing OpenAI. He's claiming that they've turned their backs on humanity for the sake of Microsoft's profits. Now, AI was supposed to be kind of a knight in shining armor when it comes to artificial intelligence. It was supposed to make sure that everything that it did benefited all of humanity. Kind of think of it like an open source project, free software that you could buy or download. But Musk is saying right now that they're going in the entirely wrong direction. Remember, not too long ago, we were talking about the board of directors of OpenAI firing the CEO and then quickly rehiring the CEO, and some of the board members were ousted. It was a very small board, and were replaced, and it really was a little bit of a mess. And we don't really know all of the inner workings of what was happening there. There's some thoughts that it had to do with something called AGI. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But what are they supposed to be doing, and what are they doing? Well, they have been taking money from Microsoft, more than $10 billion. Now, much of that, frankly, is in CPU time, right? If you've ever tried to buy CPU time on Azure, Microsoft Azure, particularly GPU time, which is what artificial intelligence really needs for the most part, it's very, very expensive. So $10 billion doesn't buy as much computer time as it used to. But Microsoft was providing that for them free of charge, kind of an in-kind contribution to them. And now what's happening is Musk is saying that Microsoft's wallet is what's getting fat right now. They are not keeping the AI that's being developed as part of a friendly neighborhood. It's not the helper it was supposed to be. And there are a whole lot of quarrels going on right now. This is not just a pillow fight. This is very, very serious. I spent some time and dug up the original documents, some of the founding documents surrounding OpenAI. And Musk is right. That's exactly what they were supposed to be doing. Not going closed source, not being a partner, close partner with Microsoft, and kind of ignoring everybody else who's out there by developing tools specifically from Microsoft. So 2015, that's when it was founded. Well, that's when Musk was co-founder back then, hoping it would be a public library for AI.
He saw some of the stuff that was going to be coming for everyone to benefit. He also covered his bets on the other side. You might be familiar with his Mars work, his rocketry, where he wants to get humans off of the Earth so that if the Earth gets struck by some massive meteor and everyone's killed, well, we'll still have human life on another planet, on Mars. Or if AI goes crazy and Arnold Schwarzenegger's not around to save the world, we would have a way to stop it, right, from before that happened. Well, fast forward a little bit, and Musk stepped away from OpenAI because of conflicts. And he's saying the OpenAI board of directors is really not doing the job of disseminating the information about building AIs. Now, I mentioned AGI, which is Artificial General Intelligence, and it looks like that was part of the problem that occurred earlier with OpenAI's board of directors and their CEO. You see, Artificial General Intelligence is what people would call intelligence. It's able to do some forms of reasoning. You know, it's not going to pop out and be Einstein, that's for sure. But they figure by the end of 2024, the OpenAI AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, will be available, and it will be able to solve all kinds of problems. It's kind of like a Swiss Army knife of AI. It can do almost anything. And there's a lot of hope for that. We're already seeing that artificial intelligence, machine learning, whatever you might want to call it, has been really good at diagnosing certain types of cancer, better than radiologists, like 70%. It's crazy how well it's been able to do. And it's done a good job on other things. It's done a terrible job on some things too. You remember the whole Gemini thing not too long ago, where Google's AI, when asked to draw pictures or show pictures of historical events and people, got it all wrong, right? It showed Nazis who were Asian or black or you name it, anything but a white person. Right. It's just crazy. In fact, some of the researchers could not get it to draw a picture of a white person. So there's a whole potential problem there. And I was talking earlier about a problem with TikTok and the Chinese government getting involved, and how not just the government, but the military is using TikTok in order to change history. So put these things together, people are not going to be using stuff like a regular Google search in the future. They're going to be using artificial intelligence. It's already out there. Bing already provides that. That's Microsoft again. Bing already provides that on their search engine. Google already provides it in their search engine and has an app available for Android devices for Gemini. And X is doing it. It's just everywhere out there. It's just incredible. And it does a half-decent job, again, of getting you thinking about things, maybe pulling out some stuff you hadn't thought about and putting some things together. But AGI is going to be light years ahead of what we're seeing right now. And this is nothing like Moore's Law. Remember Moore, Intel, back in the day, saying that computing power doubled about every 18 months? We're seeing massive leaps in artificial intelligence ability every few weeks now. It's incredible, just incredible. So by the end of 2024, we are likely to see a very, very smart AI being released, AGI. And that's part of the reason Musk has this suit in place. AGI is what gets scary. I saw an article. They had interviewed and looked at the statements of various founders of these different AI companies. And believe it or not, there's a lot of them out there. And the majority of them thought that there was a real risk with artificial intelligence eventually eliminating humanity. In fact, the numbers seem to be like there's a 20% chance that the Skynet thing with Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to come true. And we're already seeing AI being used in drones by the Ukraine army against the Russians, where it can identify targets all by itself and destroy the target. The U.S. military is already working. It has weapons that use AI to do the targeting. Right now, they're not using them in the battlefield like the Ukrainians are, but it is going that direction. It's inevitable. And AI can also identify people based on race. So, for instance, if China decides to go to battle with the United States, the AI could pretty easily decide that it's going to attack the white guys that are out there in the battlefield and leave everybody else alone, or go based on the uniforms or the helmets or the weapons, right? And we're talking months away before this is happening at scale, okay? Not just years, not months, years, I should say, just months, okay? Very, very tangled mess. Very, very scary. Okay, so right now it's an interesting sport. What can you do about it? Well, again, I think knowledge is power. That's why I try and keep you informed in my newsletter, the radio shows, podcasts, right? The training I do, the webinars, all of this stuff and workshops is to help keep you informed. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your future and the future of the world here. So keep an eye, stay informed. You really should be supporting open source projects, and particularly if you're a business that's using some AIs. There are a lot of companies out there that are using stuff from Hugging Face and others that are much, much more open than OpenAI is. The name OpenAI tells you kind of why it was founded, doesn't it? So support those companies. Ask questions. Don't just accept the tech that's been served up to you. You got to dig a little deeper. Engage with Congress critters and your local representatives. Let them know you care about how AI is being developed and used, and being used in government across the board, not just the military. And, teach the young ones. They're going to inherit this world. They need to understand what's happening and get involved. It's not just Greta Thunberg's job. All right, CraigPeterson.com. Sign up right now, CraigPeterson.com. So my tip in the newsletter this week is how not to get hacked by a QR code, because they are being used for a lot of things. And you think of a QR code, you might think of, that sign on the bus stop, right, for the lawyer that's chasing ambulances, right? Because you've seen them there before. We all have, or in other public places. But it is those, and it's also now ending up in our emails. We've had to make some major changes to our email filters because of that. They are emailing QR codes. So people are scanning. They pull out the phone, whip out QR code, I know what that is, and scan it. And then before you know it, there are problems. So they are becoming very popular, which means that the bad guys are going to use them, right? They're going to try and hose every dollar out of your account that they can possibly get their fingers on. And, restaurants are using them, especially during the lockdown. There were a lot of restaurants that did not have menus. They had a little sticker on the table with a QR code that you'd scan. Well, some of those QR codes have been replaced by malicious QR codes. And how are you going to know the difference? Well, bottom line, a QR code is really just what's called a URL. It's a URL link. It's a universal resource locator link. And that means it will take you to a website, or maybe it'll open an email for you. It'll do a whole bunch of different things. There's a lot of things that QR codes can do. But those little squares that are inside the bigger square, or sometimes as rectangles, are in fact just codes that can be easily read by a camera, a smartphone, and converted into the URL. And this is explained in detail if you want it in this week's newsletter. And you can always find it on my website as well. Just search for Craig Peterson space QR codes. But here's what you have to be aware of here. You got to approach these things with caution. You wouldn't just type in www.internetbadguys.com, would you? Well, actually you should, to see if it's properly
tagged, right? Internet Bad Guys is a website that's used by Cisco and some others to determine whether or not the URL is known to be malicious. So I just typed it into my computer, and my company, Mainstream, comes up and it says, Mainstream Managed Security, this site is blocked due to a phishing threat, internetbadguys.com. So I don't think you would type in internetbadguys.com unless you're testing to make sure that your web browser and your DNS are safe, right? But you might want to do it anyways, but just check it out. But you're not going to type it in because you're going to say, wait a minute now, why would I go to destroy my bank account, destroy my credit rating, you wouldn't go there. So what they're doing is they're taking QR code generators, which you can get. They come with pretty much every computer, every graphics program that's out there nowadays, and have that program then generate one of those nice little squares with the squares and rectangles and stuff, and generate that and print it up, and it takes you to their evil scheme. In fact, that's exactly what I have in the newsletter, evilscheme.com/promo. So, how do you know? Is it legit? Is it really the restaurant? Is it really the attorney? Is it really whatever it might be, right? They have them at the gym, in the locker room. They have them kind of everywhere. Well, here's the trick, because public spaces particularly are prime targets for these nasty QR codes that are out there. And I've got a little story in the newsletter about Sarah, and she thought her bases were all covered, and then it turned out that they weren't, and there was a problem, a pretty big problem. And you can read that in there. But she scanned a fake QR code. I've talked before about how the hackers are going out there, and instead of hosing the money out of your bank account, they're using your computer or your smartphone to do things like Bitcoin mining, as an example. And that's what ended up happening with Sarah. And so that story talks about what can happen to you, too, if you do it. So they are being sent in the email. I mentioned that one already. And the problem with them being sent in the email is that a lot of the anti-spam, anti-phishing email programs that are trying to clean up your email don't look at the graphics. Now, more and more of them have been looking at it. They're looking for things like high skin content so that they can detect that this is a pornographic picture and block it. Some are definitely checking for QR codes, and then they'll look for those known bad URLs, phishing URLs like internetbadguys.com. But a lot of them don't, right? So if you've ever seen a QR code in your email, you know it's probably not being filtered properly. And if you're responsible for the email for your company, make sure you get a QR code filter in place in order to protect the business, because this is a very big deal. Now, there are QR code scanners that you can get. I remember I had one years ago when QR codes first started becoming moderately popular, and it was not built into my phone. So I had to run the app. I think it was called Red Laser or something way back when. And I would run that app, and that app would just go ahead and take control of the camera, and it would read the QR code, and it would tell you what the QR code is. It would then compare. For instance, if you scanned a UPC code, it would understand a UPC, and it would compare it with other products or other vendors, so you knew where to get the best deal. Well, nowadays, if you've got a reasonably new smartphone, you can bet that your camera has built into it, that camera app, the ability to decode QR codes. So, one of the pro tips that I have in the newsletter is to stick with well-known, highly rated QR code scanning apps, because there's still reasons to use those third-party apps, like for doing the comparisons that I mentioned before. But because it's built into your phone, people have more access to reading those QR codes, but that doesn't mean that it's safer. Just having the ability to have a QR code reader doesn't mean that that reader is very smart.
So you should also have various filters in place on your mobile devices to block some of this stuff. But here's the basics. So, for instance, on my iPhone, and I think from the polls that I've done, most of you guys are using iPhones, but this applies to Android as well. If you see a QR code and you feel compelled to check out that QR code, you point your camera at the QR code, and then the camera app will come up with the URL that you will be taken to if you decide to click on it. So on the iPhone, for instance, it does not automatically just take you to that website. And the same thing's true for the latest versions of Android operating system, right? So you scan the QR code, it doesn't automatically take you there. Okay, great. Now what do? Well, now it should be showing you the QR code's URL equivalent. So it should be showing you that URL there, the Internet Bad Guys URL. Can you see where the problem comes in, though? Because sometimes those URLs are legitimate, but they don't point directly to the company. So they'll use a tracker of some sort. And you might notice that in my newsletters. If you look at the URLs that I send you to, if you just hover your mouse over them, you'll see I'm using a third-party company that actually sends my emails, delivers them, keeps track of what people are interested in, so I know what to include in future emails. It's marketing, right? And it's something that is perfectly legitimate. So my URL in my newsletter is not CraigPeterson.com. It may look like it on the screen, right? That's what the link says. And that's where it will ultimately take you. And you could actually type that URL in by hand. But if you mouse over that URL, you'll see it's taking you through a third party that then tracks, okay, so we have a lot of people who are interested in QR codes, for instance. So maybe we should talk more about that or do something else. All of that stuff can be viewed on that QR code screen when you're scanning it, and then you have to make the educated decision about whether or not you actually want to open up that URL, because that's what it's going to do. It's going to take you there. So privacy, yeah, there's some potential issues because you can be tracked. And again, from a marketing standpoint, I think that's okay, because I look at it and say, well, if I'm looking for a truck right now to buy, I want to see ads for my F-150, right? It's great that they know that I'm interested in buying something. Yet, on the other hand, do we really want all of that information to be put into a database that a data broker is going to sell to whomever, including governments out there? The U.S. government is a massive customer of these data brokers because they can't collect the data themselves. They just go out and they buy it from these open source companies or from data brokers. They're actually paying for the data. So, you got to make that decision yourself. But be very careful with QR codes, because ultimately you may not have any idea where they're taking you online. Hey, you'll find this and more every week. I put out my newsletter. You can get it absolutely for free. Just go to CraigPeterson.com. It's right there on the homepage. In fact, it is the homepage. And once you sign up, you'll get the free weekly newsletters, including this week's newsletter and all of the future ones. CraigPeterson.com. We have a very electric-based economy, right? Electricity. It's used for almost everything. And now, of course, we're trying to use it for vehicles as well to move stuff around, including moving us around. So we've got a few problems to solve here. First of all, there is a dramatic increase in the amount of electricity we need, as well as a decrease in a lot of areas of the world, a decrease in the amount of electricity available,
because they're shutting down various types of power plants, coal-powered, gas-powered power plants. They're putting up unreliable things like wind and solar, very expensive means of producing electricity. And of course, they've been driving up the cost of fuel on purpose, as President Obama said, right? It's necessary that gas be $8 a gallon. And that's what Biden's been working on as well, driving up the price of gas. So all of this is happening, and we're trying to put electric cars on the road. And as I've said many times, the world's not ready for it. It's absolutely kind of crazy to be trying to do anything like that right now. So as we're doing that, guess what else is increasing? The demand for electricity for our computing. Right? Have you ever used ChatGPT or Bard or any of these other artificial intelligences? They're really kind of cool, right? It's really machine learning. It doesn't really have intelligence. But when you get behind the scenes, you'll see there's a lot of money going into it. For instance, Microsoft has put over $10 billion into OpenAI. They're the guys that came up with ChatGPT. Wow, ChatGPT pretty good, does a lot of neat things. ChatGPT 4 is pretty amazing, and ChatGPT 5 apparently is going to blow us away. Some people are saying it is reaching what's called AGI, artificial general intelligence, where it can draw its own conclusions and use bits of data that it has learned or acquired in order to figure out things that it was not told about. So basically be kind of like a human mind. But all of this is drawing electricity, a whole lot of power out there. A single data center can use as much electricity as hundreds of thousands of homes. And those data centers that are running things like OpenAI or so many other artificial intelligence projects that are out there right now, those data centers are dramatically increasing in the amount of power that they use. So you go online and you do a search on Google or DuckDuckGo or maybe Bing or one of these other, just a normal search engine. Don't pull any of their ML, AI type stuff into the mix. That search on Google.com is going to use a fair amount of electricity, frankly, for that one little search. And then they're adding AI to it. And AI can use hundreds of times as much electricity as non-AI systems for doing searches. And yet that's what we're doing. I know I do that, right? I'll be trying to write an article for you guys to put into the weekly newsletter, and I want to do a little research on it. And of course, I'll use DuckDuckGo, I'll use Google, I'll use Bard, I'll use OpenAI, and put it all together and put in my own opinion, right? And there's a lot of stuff the AI misses that I want to make sure that is put into the whole mix there in the article. So it still requires a dramatic amount of my human interaction. In fact, when I use these tools for programming, what I found is that it does kind of increase my efficiency about 40%, but every bit of code I've ever gotten out of any of these had bugs, had some major problems in some cases. So, it's just not ready quite yet, but it's still using hundreds of times as much electricity. So when we get down to it, if we're going to be carbon neutral, and, you could certainly argue about man-caused global warming, right, or climate change, which everything I've seen, all of the studies really show that's not the case. We are such a minor contribution, far less than 1% of any sort of climate change is caused by humans. Now, of course, local things, that's a little different, right? We can obviously change the climate by cutting down forests or putting up forests. In fact, there's a movement now to stop the planting of trees in some areas, because what's happening is they're putting in all of these wonderful little trees and they're putting them into areas where that tree is not natural. So it's choking out the natural vegetation in the area as well as the natural trees. So, again,
unintended consequences. But anyways, we need more electricity as we move more into this artificial intelligence future. So how are we going to do that? A really good question. We're not going to be able to do that with solar panels. We're not going to be able to do that with windmills. Not a chance. Well, these smaller modular reactors called SMRs are really the future, certainly for the immediate future here. And these are basically a power plant that'll power a neighborhood. They can be bigger than that, right? They can power a whole data center, which is equivalent to hundreds of thousands of homes. But there's problems with those. And the biggest problem isn't the safety, because now we're using physics to make sure that it will never melt down. It can't melt down. These new plants don't have to have pumps that are running all of the time. So you can't get a Fukushima. You cannot get a Chernobyl. You cannot get a 3 Mile Island. These plants, it cannot happen. So we need these plants. How do we get them? Well, we have to go through the approval process. The Nuclear Regulatory Agency is out there. They have been using these rules, some of which are more than 50 years old, to rate these brand new types of technology. And, it's true with any organization, any bureaucracy, and it is especially true for our federal bureaucracy. Those bureaucracies just take on more and more power and authority, give themselves more power and authority all of the time, right? Which is, frankly, a pretty huge problem when you get right down to it, right? So there is a company that is trying to get approval, and they finally got approval for one of these small modular reactors. It's called NuScale Power. You'll find them online, NuScale, all one word, NuScale Power, and kind of a cool little company. Right now it's trading at about $3.50 a share, give or take. So, I'm not giving investment advice, but it's not one of these huge companies that's out there. That's what my point, right? You're not paying a few $100s a share for it. So let's talk about what NuScale had to go through in order to get some form of approval. Well, here we go. There's one developer that's gone through this process, and it got its design approved, and it cost NuScale around $500 million to get approval. $500 million, $500 million US dollars. And its application was 12,000 pages long and had around 2 million pages of support materials behind it. Pretty big deal, isn't it? So we're going to talk about how that collapsed and who else is looking at this nuclear power, and also that this COP summit that the United Nations just had, the U.S. as well as other countries have signed on to triple the amount of nuclear power they're generating. Yeah, some people seem to be waking up. Make sure you're on my newsletter list so you get this newsletter as well as others for free. CraigPeterson.com. I'm kind of thinking maybe they've been listening to my show for the last 20 years because I've been talking about this a long time. But yes, they are trying to get it to the point where we have dramatically more nuclear power because these things are so safe. But when we're talking about this one SMR developer, NuScale Power, and the fact that it cost them $500 million to get a design approved, 12,000-page application, 2 million pages of support materials, it is absolutely nuts, right? Who can do that? Well, and then to top it off, plans for NuScale's first commercial project, according to the Wall Street Journal, collapsed last month when a group of utilities in the Mountain West couldn't get enough members to sign up. So they were trying to get these various utility companies to pony up and buy this nuclear power. I keep thinking about what happened with the Seabrook plant in New Hampshire. beautiful, great design. It's not as good as these new SMRs, no question about it, because these new plants are just basically stamped out at a factory. But the plant where they had planned on bringing on multiple reactors, not only did they not bring on multiple reactors, they ended up decommissioning the primary reactor. Now, it's insane what we've been doing here. And I can understand people say, well, we don't want a nuclear power plant next to our house. NIMBY is a big problem. That's the reason why we don't have windmills off of Cape Cod, right? Not in my backyard. Not when I have money. I'm going to fight you. I'm going to bring lawyers. Or I don't have money. I'm going to be out there with picket signs. I'm going to have all my friends chanting and chaining themselves to the gates. And so these businesses, like what happened out in the mountain West here, when these utilities decided not to go with this, said, well, what's our cost of doing business here? And consider that just the $500 million to get the approval. It just boggles the mind. Absolutely boggles the mind. Oh my gosh. Anyhow, they are working on some other projects as well. They're trying to go domestically, overseas, all of these different plans. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has plans to host an international meeting on AI next year. Now, this is interesting because AI is part of the reason we need so much power. And when you get right down to it, there's some very interesting concepts, man, we could talk about for a long time. But one of the big ones is kind of like the Star Trek universe. If you're a Trekker, and I've watched every episode of all of the Star Trek's everythings, right? You know that it's a future society that's portrayed, and basically nobody has to work, as a rule, right? Some people do, some people don't. And now you've got people who are working in the ships, right, that are flying around the universe. But the bottom line is the energy is almost completely free, and they can turn energy into physical material. So think about the replicators that they have. So it needs power, and that power then can be turned into food or a part for a machine or almost anything. So what Elon Musk is proposing is something I've been saying for a very, very long time. At some point, the machines, including the artificial intelligences, are going to be able to provide us all with a universal, not basic income, but a universal high income. We're a long ways away from this, people, so don't get me wrong here when I'm talking about this. I'm not talking about some socialist utopia where there's a few people at the top, like the Bidens, that make millions of dollars and the rest of us down one paycheck away from bankruptcy, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the ability to have almost infinite amount of power very inexpensively, having that power be able to be used by artificial and general intelligence to solve real problems like illnesses, like food growth and people who starve in the streets. And being able to, at that point, also turn some of that energy into something material, which, by the way, there are already lab experiments underway and some success in that realm. So that's a future that is going to happen, but it's, as I said, it's a long ways away before it happens. And of course, you also have the problem of the dictators out there. Most of the countries in the world, the vast majority of member states in the United Nations are despots. They are dictators, dictatorships, de facto or otherwise. And how are you going to stop those guys from taking the newfound power, literal power, and using it to amass more wealth, power, and strength for themselves and steer the country in a direction that's going to benefit them as opposed to benefit everybody else? That's always the problem, right? How do you go to the most exclusive retirement home in the world, i.e. the U.S. Senate, and now you are all of a sudden a multimillionaire? And that's true for many House members as well. Do you think those people are not going to start grabbing onto the money, the power? Of course they will, right? That's what they do. Joe Biden's been in the Senate since it was legal for him, based on his age, to be in the Senate, right? He ran for office and won when he was 29, if I remember correctly, and didn't start serving till he was 30. So all of that, let's push that aside for now. Let's get back to nuclear power, which is the reality of where we're at today. It is clean. These new nuclear power plants have enough fuel right now to operate at our electrical consumption needs for 100 to 150 years in the U.S. right now without mining anything new. Some of these nuclear power plants, they actually burn the waste from the old power plants that we have been storing. Now, I'm using the term burn loosely. Obviously, you don't burn that stuff. But they process it and they use it for generating more power. So it's incredible. It's incredible stuff we should be doing, if only for the reason of getting rid of some of the old radioactive materials that are out there. But with AI, with the need for data centers and the high costs of electricity in most of the world, Microsoft is now talking about building their own nuclear plant to power their own data centers in order to power artificial intelligence, OpenAI. So that was kind of a long chiasmic loop there, frankly, but that's what's going on. We will see more nuclear power. We have to have nuclear power. I think we are way early on electric cars, and it's obvious that the market's waking up to that. People aren't buying them like they used to. Way down. Better than 20% price drops in some areas of electric vehicles. They are highly polluting. They may have no exhaust coming out of the pipe, but every other part, from the manufacturer through generation of electricity, is highly polluting. And yet people are so short-sighted. So if you haven't bought an electric car, good for you. I get it. If you have bought an electric car, damn, those things are cool. Okay. But, bottom line is I haven't spent a dime on them, and I don't plan on it. Because, again, federal government picking a winner, are you kidding me? Right? There's a big movement right now for having ammonia power for cars. There's a lot we could do, and we're not exploring, thanks to the retirement home that is the U.S. Senate and the House. And the presidential office, I guess. Hey, make sure you get my weekly newsletter for free. Sign up, CraigPeterson.com. The biggest threats right now to small and medium businesses, so that means, small business is up to about $20 million. I think a medium business is up to $100 million. So if you're under the $100 million mark, listen up here, because the biggest threats right now are, number one, some of these scripting frameworks, and number two, business email compromise scams. These things are absolutely huge. So this is an article from HelpNet Security, and they are quoting that, here you go. Attackers deployed malware in 44% of the cases, but the remaining 56% of incidences included what's called living off the land binaries, so LOL bins. Scripting frameworks such as PowerShell and remote monitoring and management software. And that's a really big one that's gotten nailed last year. You might remember the whole SolarWinds attack. So, and that, by the way, is what most of the managed services providers are using, and we use an RMM framework, okay? So let's explain this a little bit. Microsoft has always been in a game of catch-up. They started out, Bill Gates sold to IBM an operating system that Bill Gates didn't even have. Bill Gates hadn't barely even thought about it. And he sold them an operating system. He sold them, signed the contracts. And then he had to run around and try and find an operating system that he could then call MS-DOS. And the whole Seattle Software Works thing he bought for, I think it was $50,000. And then off he goes, right? So from the very, very beginning, they've been playing catch up. He got the whole idea of the windowing stuff from Xerox PARC. Xerox at Palo Alto Research Center had just an amazing system way ahead of its time. And so did Steve Jobs. He modeled the Apple user interface after some of the ideas that came out of Xerox PARC. Again, not something that Bill Gates came up with or did. He just had his people copy it. And not do a very good job at it either. But you know what I think about Microsoft. So Unix computers have had some serious advantages for a very long time. Unix was started really in the 1960s is where it started. And it was designed as an operating system that Ma Bell could use. The Bell operating companies, the phone company basically, could use. And could use it on all of their computers because they had computers that had been around for a long time. And they wanted a single operating system that they could kind of run everywhere. And there's a bunch of background here too with Multics and other things. I get it, right? We're making this pretty simple. But that's where Unix came from. And then in the 1970s, Bell figured out, hey, wait a minute now. We're giving all of this hardware to universities, and universities have even more hardware than what we've given them, and they're all different. They all run different operating systems. So how about we give them a license to Unix? And so that's where the version 5, 7 of really version 7 Unix came from, and then it was grown commercially into System 5, etc. And it grew up in that environment, in the university environment and in the networked environment, which is exactly what Bell was doing, the phone company. All of the phone lines that we had, even in the 70s, were actually digital behind the scenes. It was amazing what they were doing. And then when the universities had it, of course, they had to network their computers. So all of the networking we're using today was developed in the Unix world. It really was. And of course, we could talk about fringe cases, but it really was. And the security that was put in place was for the universities to secure their systems from their students who were constantly trying to break in, change grades, get whatever they could out of these things, right? So it was designed to be very robust. In fact, the internet was designed so that it could withstand a nuclear attack. You could wipe out major portions of the internet, and yet the internet would still work. BGP today, that border gateway protocol that we use and that I'm a part of and have been for decades now, that BGP allows the internet to reroute all of the traffic depending on what availability there is. If part of it goes offline, it's incredibly robust. And then along meanders Bill Gates and Microsoft saying, "Oh, we got to do something about this," and they bought a license to what was it called? I think it was Spider Networks. I think they're out of the UK, actually Ireland, if I remember correctly. And Spider, I worked on that code, right? I helped to fix that code. I worked in Microsoft's kernel. I worked on Windows NT, the very first versions out there, the 3.5.1 and all of that stuff. That was me. I was in all of that stuff, okay? But Microsoft never did anything right from an engineering standpoint, ever. You know, marketing, yeah. Oh, you check all of the boxes. You, if you're old enough, you remember how terrible all of the Microsoft Office software was. And it kind of remains that way today, right? So Microsoft tried to get into the internet game 20 years after everybody else was into it, and they didn't do a very good job on it. And now Microsoft is, hey, yeah, you pay us $20 a month per person, and we'll give you all of the Office software. We'll give you a Windows license. Oh, and you can use Teams, and you can use email, Microsoft email, and all of it has serious problems when it comes to all of the networking stuff.
It's just crazy. So our friends in the Unix world, and I've been in the Unix world heavily since about 1980, the Unix world had the concept of a shell. Now, remember, Microsoft, certainly it had a shell back in the MS-DOS days, right? And then they moved away from that. Everything needed to be managed via the interface, right? The GUI, graphical user interface, with the mouse and point and click and things and move everything around. That's how it all had to be managed. And then Microsoft finally came to realize, wait a minute now, maybe there's better ways to do this. And I have to just shake my head. I have two of my kids actually work for banks, and they had what they called the dark side. And the dark side was the computer system that had IBM mainframes behind it, and it was all CLI. It was all command line interface. It was all this shell. And you type in the command, and ta-da, there's your answer. Versus the windowing interface, where you had to click on this, and then click on that, and click on this, and click on that. So it was much easier to train people to click on stuff on a Microsoft Windows interface than it was to train someone what those command lines were. And yet it was way faster to use the command lines. It ran way faster. You could get way more information. You could get very specific information that you could never get on the Windows apps. And then what do the banks do? Well, they eventually fade away from the mainframes in the back end. They put screen scrapers on them and stuff and make it all Windows. So at the same time, Microsoft finally realized Windows is terrible. Yeah. If you really want to do work, if you really want to administer a computer, no. You don't need to go and click around everywhere. And they came up with PowerShell. So they, again, ripped off the concept and had I would argue, a poor implementation of it. Now, PowerShell today has a lot of powerful features in it. There's no question about it. It is not of itself buggy. So I don't want you to get that concept, right? It's not like the up to version 5 of Word, which was just terribly buggy, and then up to version 10 before they finally fine-tuned it, right? But they finally adopted shells. And now there's stuff that you can only do via PowerShell in Windows. You can't even get at it through any of their windowing interfaces, their admin interfaces. You just can't do it. So I told you all of that so I can tell you this. The PowerShell, as implemented by Microsoft, is giving you access to almost everything, and the hosers know it. So rather than installing software on your computer that is identifiable malware, they are using tools that use PowerShell in such a way that you're in deep trouble. So Microsoft, of course, is not a Unix base. Apple is. If you're using a Mac, you've got Unix behind you. You've got those decades now. We're up to 7 decades, 5 or 6 decades worth of experience with networks and with attacking and with protection and everything else, right? Not true for PowerShell. Not true for PowerShell. So the bad guys, 60% of the time are using, 65% according to this article from HelpNet Security, are using this poor implementation of a shell called PowerShell in order to get into your computers and take things over. It's absolutely insane. Now, these RMM tools, remote management tools, are legitimate software. But when they're used for intrusion purposes, they can easily evade anti-malware protection and literally blend into the environment. And that's why we use Cisco's anti-malware platforms in order to help protect systems, because it does specifically look for some of these things, right? Absolutely amazing here. In some cases, they've observed adversaries diversifying among several RMM tools, such as using a combination of commercial and open source items to ensure redundant access to victim environments. This is a problem. It's a problem I'm working on for my customers. You can never be 100%
But if you're running Windows, you are guaranteed to be extremely vulnerable, at least for today. Just as a word to the wise. Man, switch to a Mac, switch to Unix, switch to stuff that is field proven for many, many decades. All right. Online, CraigPeterson.com, and I got that off my chest. I feel so much better right now.